been given for your kingdom and for your glory, we ask it all. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, I was stood over there and I suddenly dawned on me. I looked around and there were a number of faces that I didn't know. And you're probably all looking at me going, well, who on earth are you? So sorry about that. I'm Phil. I'm the pastor, the minister. I don't know what label you would normally assign to the person in my position, but I'm the pastor here at this church. And so it's great to welcome you here and to have you with us. And our prayer is that you'll have been blessed by the worship and that you'll know God's presence, that he's real and living, and that as we read from the Bible and share from the Bible now, that you'll hear him speaking to your heart and that you'll leave this place changed. That's what we believe for, that's what we pray for, and so that's what we hope your experience will be. This morning we're continuing with our series Together. I was really pleased that Judith brought that reading, out of weakness you find strength. Because I am, how do I phrase this? Because I am slow to take the hint, God likes to repeat things. Anybody else in that boat? Oh, thank goodness I'm not on my own. And so recently I've been finding that God's been repeating this message a lot. And so Judy just brought a word saying that God's wanting to say to us this morning that we need to have our hearts enlarged as we lay things down. If we stop holding on to the things and lay them down and seek God, then our hearts will be enlarged. And our capacity for love as we love him will grow. And that's what we want, isn't it? That's what my prayer is for myself and for you this morning. We're going to be continuing with our series Together, and we'll open the Bible soon. But I just wondered, has anybody got these lying around in their... yeah, bungee cords. Great things. Have you ever managed to catch yourself across the knuckles when they... Yeah, that one. Oh, pain that is unbearable. As a kid, I can remember finding them, and the only thing I found useful for them was putting them on the back of my bike and then trying to tow things behind my bike, which is great until this end gives way and comes to meet this end. And I will leave you to draw your own conclusions from what happens in that moment. But bungee cords have their use and their purpose. They've got to be put under tension. And I was wondering, there's a great... If you're ever going to a luncheon or I'm looking around, looking at you, thinking, are you the kind of people that would be invited to a highfalutin, high estate luncheon? I'm not going to pass judgment, so I'm not going to say anything. Or if you're having lunch with people that you don't know, or maybe going on a date for the first time, then trying to generate conversation can be difficult. And so one of the things that you can do is play a game. Have you ever done the game Would You Rather? I'm looking, I can see lots of blank faces. I'll give you some examples. So here's one for you. Would you rather have feet as hands or hands as feet? Oh, there's... Hands up for... No, sorry, I was going to then do feet up for, yeah. Well done, Stu. You were ahead of the curve there, Stu. I'm nothing if not predictable. All right, then. Here's a more profound one for you. Would you rather be alone for the rest of your life or always be surrounded by annoying people? Don't look around. I've saved you there from a social faux pas. And the last one, would you rather be poor but help people or become incredibly rich by hurting people? You Christians, remember? Just saying. Would you rather plays on the idea of tension in life, doesn't it? Plays on the idea of there's this or there's this. Which would you rather? And so this morning we're going to be thinking about that. We're going to be thinking about tension and lives in tension. But if you let's have a show of hands. Who here this morning, how many of us, and be honest, how many of us are living lives in tension right now or feeling life in stress? Yeah? life that's stressed in one way or another. And life is stressful. Bex and I we've experienced tension and stress this week, various ways. But life is stressful, not just because we've got a toddler. We're pulled in many directions. Life pulls on us and makes demands of us, and it's easy to become stressed in it all. And yesterday at the Ministry Leaders Retreat, we spent time in prayer at the end of the day. We'd heard these huge stories about what God had done, from a simple prayer of, would you make us have more impact in the community we're in, to now doing things that I'm sure the people that were there would maybe talk you through some of the amazing things that they heard yesterday. But yesterday we heard, as we were praying together, God spoke to us and he said about laying stuff down. Laying stuff down. Judy brought a word, of laying down with the one hand to take up with the other hand. And we're also reminded that we were loved, that God loves us. And we're called to be vulnerable in that. But there's a tug of war going on in many ways. That Noel brought us a word saying that, in so many ways we feel that we should be pulling in this direction, but God is leading in this direction. And like the bungee cord when I tried to tow things with my bike, it's going to give at some point. We should be, as Christians, moved to action rather than inactivity. That's what should be the consequence of the gospel. We're not called to sit in a pew on a Sunday morning, or in a comfy padded seat in our case, and think, well, isn't this lovely? And now I can rest in all that is mine in Jesus. But we're called to activity. But I understand that life is stressful. Okay? So we're holding this in tension. We should be doing, but life is stressful. And so we're going to look at a story this morning that I hope shows us a way that we can find a healthy balance, a healthy way to live. And so if you turn with me to Genesis, we're going to read Genesis 28, verses 10 to 22. Our title this morning is Torn Together. And I'm aware of the paradox in that we're torn together. Okay, before anybody goes, oh, it's deliberate. But we are people that are torn together. So if you turn to Genesis 28, 10 to 22, and we'll read together. We're reading about Jacob. So Jacob, Isaac's son. And Jacob is now on the run. Jacob has stolen, not only has he tricked his brother Esau out of his birthright, which we'll hear a little more about later on, but he's also managed to steal his blessing from his father. And so he's not the most popular guy within his family right now. So he's on the run, and this is what we read. Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran. And he came to a certain place and stayed there that night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. And in you and in your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will not bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. So early in the morning, Jacob took the stone that he had put under his head, set it up for a pillar, and poured oil on the top of it. He called the name of that place Bethel, but the name of the city was Luz at the first. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you. Right. That's quite a bit there. The first thing I want you to see is this is a story of two brothers. Two brothers. Before we read this account, back in Genesis 25, and you can check this out in your own time, Genesis 25, 19 to 28, Rebecca is pregnant. And she has two babies inside her, and she can feel them tussling and struggling within. And so she goes to God and she says, God, what is happening? What is going on? And God speaks to her and says that out of your womb will come two boys, and the younger will serve the older. And so Isaac and Esau are born. Jacob. I've got Isaac written there. You're right, Jacob. Jacob and Esau are born. Jacob is born, and he is loved by Rebecca. Rebecca thinks he's the apple of her eye. She thinks he's wonderful. Hands up if you're your mother's favourite. It's not a great thing to know, admittedly, but yes. So Rebecca loved Jacob. Isaac loved Esau. Esau was a man's man. Esau was a hunter. He went out and hunted things and brought meat. And so Isaac was there like, I love Esau. He's my man. And so this inevitably introduced tension to life. Can you imagine growing up in that way? You know, absolutely. It's written in the Bible. You know, it's not like they tried to hide this. I can remember my brother once going to my dad and saying, it's not fair, you always pick on me. He's your favourite. And Dad tried to do that classic thing of, as a parent, trying to fudge that thing a little bit and kind of go, no, we love you all equally, but just differently, and you all have different giftings and ways to test our patience. No. So these two know, it's written in the Bible that they were loved by mother and father, respectively. But I want to tell you, there is such a thing as healthy tension in life. It doesn't seem, from what's recorded, it doesn't seem that this has a negative influence on them as such, but there is a healthy tension to be found in life. The one I was thinking of was in terms of, and I'm aware that Esther's here. I think I've said, yes, I have. That our musculoskeletal system exists in tension. We're designed, and we know that that's the case when we snap a tendon. Anybody done that here? I haven't. I've not been athletic enough to snap a tendon. Don't laugh at that. But when we snap a tendon, we know that muscles are in tension and it pulls. And so there is a healthy tension to be found in life. So we've got these two brothers who are existing in this world of tension. And then we come across two soups. Two soups. There's two bowls of soup in this story. The first one we see in Genesis 25, 29 to 34, where Esau comes in. He's been working hard. He's been doing men's things. And he comes home, and Jacob has been cooking. And he comes home, and he sees the soup that Jacob has made, and he says, give me a bowl of soup. And Esau says to Jacob, give me a bowl of soup. And Jacob says, well, I'll give it to you, but only if you give me your birthright. And he said, what have I for use for things like that right now? Give me a bowl of soup. And he says, only if you swear to me that you will give me your birthright. And so Esau says, I swear to you. He says, I am close to death. Now, it depends how you read that verse. It could be that he's saying, I'm absolutely starving, like Bryce constantly exists in a state of constantly starving. Seriously, we had a huge roast dinner last night at my parents' house, and Bryce dusted it off and said, excellent starter, what's for main? But you could read it that way. Or I think the way that Esau means it is, I'm going to die. I'm going to face death, And what use is a birthright to me when I'm dead? What's the point of all these blessings? The problem is, if we read Hebrews, later on in the New Testament, the writer to the Hebrews says that because he said that thing, he was counted as unholy. What's going on? All he's done is he said, you can take my place. You can be first. Well, what he's not understood is that in God's plan, as the title and the inheritance is passed, the firstborn gets a double portion. The one with the birthright gets twice the inheritance of the other children. That's nothing significant. But what he has failed to realize is that the birthright pertains to the lineage of grace that God is working through. God is at work in this family. The promise to Abraham is still active, is still to be fulfilled. And so to be the firstborn, the one with the birthright, means that you are going to be the means by which God's grace breaks into this world. And so Esau, not seeing that, manages to label himself as unholy because he rejects the way that God is to bring grace into this world. I want you to see there that it is possible to lose eternal blessings because we've chased after earthly pleasures. Okay? That's what we're talking about when we're thinking about laying down this morning. It's possible to miss out on eternal blessings because we're so caught up with earthly pleasures. Think about it. Esau gave up all of that for a bowl of soup. There's a bishop who wrote a commentary on this passage who says, never was a piece of food bought at such price other than the apple that Adam and Eve took from the tree. I think he's right. Anyway, there's a second bowl of soup. This is his mother's idea. His mother's suggestion, Jacob deceives Isaac with a bowl of soup. Isaac, being old and blind, is distracted by soup of the day. That's what happens in the story. As we read in Genesis 27, Rebecca, being savvy, says to him, go and take a bowl of soup. She puts fur on his arms to make him look more masculine. Yes. Sorry, I'm just thinking, yeah, I'm an Esau. No, that's not a good thing. That's a bad thing, Phil. But she says, go to your father and he will bless you. He will give his blessing to you. And it's possible. And so Isaac, being old and blind, is deceived, is tricked simply by a bowl of soup. And again, we see that it is possible to get caught up. It actually says that Jacob brings him a bowl of soup and wine to drink, and then he blesses him. It's possible to get so caught up in the moment, in earthly things, in the hunger for the now, that we don't hunger after the eternal things. The other thing that we see here is the miracle that God manages to work in sinful actions to the good that he has planned. That's staggering, isn't it? There's this deception at the heart of it. Does God say that that lie and that deception is right? Absolutely not. But does God work it into his plan for all eternity? Yes. The next thing I want you to see as we move on is there are two kingdoms seen in this story. So 2 sons, 2 soups, 2 kingdoms. This is the passage that we read. Jacob is at a life-defining moment here. Jacob is on the run. Esau, being a hunter, means that he's skilled with at least a spear, if not bow and arrow, whatever his weapon of choice would be. And he is overheard speaking to someone saying, I'm going to kill that brother of mine. Hands up if that would be you. You can kind of understand poor Esau a little bit, can't you? He realized that Jacob has tricked him out of his birthright, and now he's got his father's blessing. He's got everything. And Esau's heartbroken. And so Rebekah says, go to my father Laban, get out of the country, disappear until your brother isn't angry anymore. And so Jacob is at this life-defining moment. He's crossing across the border at this point, and he has nothing with him. We'll find out later on in his story. If you sit down after lunch, when you've had your big roast dinner, Bryce, and you're wanting to read the rest of the story, because Jacob says, I crossed over this way with nothing but a walking stick. And when he comes back, he's bringing far more than that with him. So he's at this moment, he's at this crisis, and it says that the sun sets, and so he sets up a pillow. He's on his way to Laban's house to find a wife, and he sets up a pillow. Now, that pillow, it sounds far more uncomfortable than the pillows at the travel lodge, if I'm honest. He sets up a rock. You know, if you're going to have a sleepless night, that's the night you're going to have a sleepless night, isn't he? He pulls up a rock, puts his head on this rock, and he starts to dream. Hands up if you're prone to dream. It's good news. Hands up if you know that God speaks to us at times in dreams. He does. The amazing thing is we're hearing stories, and I know we heard recently from Turkey, didn't we, that God is speaking to people who don't know him through dreams in Turkey. People who see a man and want to find out more, and see the man with nail-pierced hands and blood-stained clothes and say, who is he? And the Christians are able to say, that's Jesus you saw. Anyway, I could disappear down that rabbit warren, but I'm not going to. Jacob has this dream, and it's a dream of a staircase. It's a staircase that's rooted in earth and goes up into heaven. And he sees angels coming up and down. And then he sees the Lord stood at the top, speaking to him. God establishes the covenant promises to Jacob. Do you notice something here in this exchange? Jacob isn't a believer at this point. Do you see that? Because after this encounter, he says, if God does these things, then he will be my God. That's a bit of a shock for us civilized Christians who read that and go, but you're meant to be a follower, and then God will. Jacob says, no, if God is proven to be right in these promises, then I will follow him. Just an aside, we were challenged with that a little bit yesterday. We said that so many churches, there's an attitude and an atmosphere of you come in, you become like us, and then you're welcome. And actually, when we read God's account, God usually takes the misfits and the broken people and the people who don't fit in anywhere and incorporates them into his kingdom. Are we ready for that as a church, as God's people? Sitting next to somebody that we just can't relate to in any way, but because of the grace of God and the good news of the gospel, God has brought them into his kingdom, and they're part of the family with us. Anyway, this moment, Jacob has this dream, and God establishes the covenant, but there's a resetting of the tension point for Jacob here. Do you notice it? There's a resetting of the tension point, because up until this point, he's on the run from his brother. So who's he afraid of in that moment? It's Esau. He's terrified of what Esau's going to do to him. But in this moment, after the dream, it says that he is afraid of who? God. He realizes God is in this place, and I never realized it, and he was afraid. When we realize that God is in the middle of something and it catches us unaware, there should be a sense of, God's in this. God's here. Anyway. So what's the point of all that I've said to you? What do I want you to take home? Again, these are the take-home points now, okay? These are the things I want you to understand from this story. The first thing is that every action, all of Jacob's actions so far have led to this moment. It was Jacob's actions that put his life in tension, that put him in the stressful situation he was in. You know, like I said, he's in this place of using a stone as a pillow because he chose to con his brother and his father. And our choices and actions can introduce unnecessary tensions into our lives. Sometimes there are things that we choose to do. There are things that we choose to chase after. There are things that we make the decision that that's what I want, even though it's not what God would want, it's what I want, and I pursue it to the point of introducing unhelpful tension in my life. Unhealthy tension, I define that as things that pull us away from God and all that he has called you to be. So those are the things that we were talking about laying down earlier, to one extent. Those are the sinful things, the desires, the things that pull at our hearts. We were discussing yesterday, there are even sometimes God things that we need to lay down because they're distracting from us from God. It's possible that we take good things. Tim Keller says this, the minister of a church in New York says that it is possible that you take good things and make them God things in terms of worshipping them, and then you've dragged yourself away from God. You've set up other idols in your life that pull you away from knowing God. I've heard this week of somebody, a part of this church, who has made a decision that has released them from an unhealthy tension in their life. I'm not going to tell you, but I'll tell you what my heart leapt within me when I heard the story. They told it to me to my face, and I was thrilled. It was all I could do not to leap across and give them a big hug, saying, "That's great!" Because they recognized that the choices that they were making were not helping them in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it was an unhealthy tension in their life. So you know where this is going. And this is me as well. What about you? What about you? What are the unhealthy tensions for you currently? The things that pull you away from all that God is calling you to be and all that God has for you. The relationships that are toxic. The habits which are self-destructive. The thought patterns which just descend into depths of despair. The places which lead us into sin. Which of these things are adding unhealthy tensions to your life? Because I want to tell you, they're pulling you away from all that God has for you and all that God is calling you to be. When you're camping, the thing that makes all the difference to the tent that you're staying in is how you stretch out the guy ropes. I noticed a wry smile on Coral's face then. Because for those that don't know, she had a close encounter with a guy rope, didn't you? And you came off second. But it's how you stretch out guy ropes that makes a difference to the tent that you're going to be staying in. You set them so that they're against the prevailing wind, they're pegged out tight, and they're holding the tent in tension. And sometimes we can choose to put our tent pegs of our lives, the things that pull us out, we can choose to put them in places that aren't helpful, and it distorts all that God is trying to do in our lives. So after the service, we're going to have time to pray with those of you who feel that. And I'll be honest, there are probably the majority of us, if not all of us, that could put our hands up and say, hey, there's things that are unhealthy tensions in my life. But if this is you, if you're hearing me speak to you and you think, Phil, I know that there are actions, there are choices that I make, there are places that I go, there are people that I relate with who just are toxic to me. And they're not helpful. Maybe they're not toxic. Maybe they're just unhelpful. They're keeping me back from all that God has for me. Then I want to encourage you to come and have prayer with the prayer ministry team who will be over here. What's the other thing that I want you to see? I want you to see every promise that's here. Later on in Genesis, we see Jacob returns a changed man. He comes back and he comes to the same place. And do you know what he's found? The man who said, if God does this, comes back and says, God has surely done this. And he comes back with wealth and a family. He crossed over, he says, I crossed over with just a walking stick. I'm coming back with flocks and cattle and a family and riches and so many good things that God has given me while I've been in this place. And God has brought me back. The promises have started to be fulfilled, and he is now a worshipper of God. That's my prayer for you this morning, is that you'll find that God is faithful and true. We've sung it in the songs that we've sung. And there are so many people in this place that would, if I said to you, has God been faithful? There are people here who would say, absolutely. In every circumstance in life, God has been faithful. And that's my prayer for you, is that you would know that God is faithful. But there's a promise that remained unfulfilled. Have you seen the unfulfilled promise? He's expanded. He has spread out north, south, east, and west. He's grown in wealth. There's so many blessings that are his. But the one that's not been seen yet is that through him, every family on earth would be blessed. It's the one promise that we haven't seen fulfilled yet. And we don't see it fulfilled until Jesus comes. Until Jesus comes to earth. And that's when we start reading the New Testament of all the things that Jesus comes to accomplish and all the things that he does, and why we celebrate communion, because through him, every family on earth can know blessing and wholeness and restoration. The restoration that Jacob finds when he meets his brother Esau, and Esau embraces him with a hug and says, brother. Wow. God had done that. God had brought reconciliation to a relationship that looked like it was doomed forever. I talked earlier about healthy tension. You see, as Christians, we are called to be in tension. You wanted me to tell you that I've got the secret to a stress-free life, didn't you? And it is stress-free, but it is a life in tension. There's a difference between stress and tension. Stress is oppressive. Stress weighs down on us. Stress is a burden to carry, whereas tension is like, have you ever been in a towed vehicle on a rope? Yeah? The one thing you want to do is keep that rope tight. The moment you let it go slack, and my dad was the worst for being towed by, because he would accelerate away, you'd end up with slack in the rope, and you'd end up with whiplash just being towed. But that's what it's like in life. It's important that we keep this tension. And as Christians, we find that tension in the ladder that Jacob saw, the ladder that's grounded in earth, but also reaching up to heaven. That's the tension that we exist in as believers. That we're people of two kingdoms. We're people of two homes. Well, not even two homes, because as the old spiritual song used to go, this world is not my home, I'm just a passing through. We want to be home. We want to be with Jesus, but we're here now. We feel the pull. We feel the tension. That's what happened to Jacob when suddenly he realizes God is in this place. It reset everything and put his life in this healthy tension of knowing God, seeking to live for him here, but knowing that this is not his home and he's called to heaven. So I want to tell you, that's where your heart needs to be. I read earlier in the prayer meeting upstairs that the Apostle Paul, when he's writing in the New Testament, he says, in the same book that I read from at, same letter that I read from at communion, he says that he feels this tension at work within him, that it would be better for him to die and be with Jesus in heaven, but while he's here on earth, there's meaningful work to be done. And so, Christian brother and sister, that's where you are. There's stuff for you to do. While there's breath in your body, God has work for you to do here and now. So that's what you need to pursue. So, unhealthy stress versus healthy tension. I want to introduce you to a life of healthy tension. The now and the not yet of the new kingdom. So, we're going to sing a final song in a moment, but I'd encourage you, if what I've been saying, if you're somebody that knows stress right now, and you need to reset a healthy tension in life, then please come and seek prayer and we've got people that are willing and equipped to pray with you. Or if you're not sure and you're a member of our community group, go and speak to your community group leader. But please speak to someone. Speak to someone and say, what God has been saying is speaking to my heart, and there's things I need to lay down, things I need to let go of, and I need God's help to do that. And if you're somebody who thinks you've got that tension right, well, let's get working for the kingdom. Let's get serving for the King. We're going to stand and sing as our final song, Bless the Lord, O my soul.